special speaker. We are just going to go over like what's in the WSET study guide, just because I don't know if you guys have studied for it yet, or if you're studying for level 3, this is a good review for level 2 before we get started. So let's just give it a couple more minutes. And let me see if I can just. All right, so I think we're gonna get started now. So we have everybody. Hi, I think we have some new people that weren't here last week. So hi, Yvette, and hi, Henrik. So today we're gonna just talk about like studying for the WSET, like why somebody would even take the WSET, what other kind of like wine education programs there are out there, and who's taking what, who's doing what. So yes. Actually, let me just do one more thing before we get started. I'm just gonna go live on Facebook. Sorry, you guys. Just give me a minute to get this started. Yay, okay. So we are live on Facebook now. Study group. All right, so there you go. So we are live now on Facebook and we are going to get started. So like, let's first just talk about, I'll unmute everybody and let's just talk about like, what are some of the things that you guys are studying, or like what organizations you've studied with so far. And yeah, so I'm gonna try to mute everybody who wants to be unmuted. Go ahead, who wants to start? So who's studying right now for wine?
Oh gosh.
Go ahead, Tatu.
Oh, my goodness, I can't even figure this out. Hi guys, my name is Tato and I'm at Cape Wine Academy. I'm doing diploma with them. So I'm done with level 1, level 2.
Nice.
So yeah.
Okay, what about Silas? Silas, do you want to tell us where you studied or where you're studying?
My background is on WSET. I have done up to level 3, and now at the opportune time, I'll be able to start my diploma.
Nice. Okay, so we have an advanced WSET in the house as well. Anybody else that's studying for wine currently, or that has any interest in studying with some of the different programs?
This is Michelle. I studied at the Capital Wine School here in the DC area. I took my my level 2 exam in December and I passed it with merit. I'm really proud.
Right.
So now I'm trying to figure out, I'd like to do 3 next. I'm kind of waiting for the COVID to to be over because classes have been suspended because I'd prefer to go in and taste and do all that in person as opposed to online. So in the meantime, though, I'm going to take a it's not a certification class, but just a wine business studies class with them in a couple weeks next month, so I can learn more about the business side of it. While I wait for to take the W-2, 3 rather.
Oh, I think that's pretty awesome. The business side of it is always very, very helpful. What about you, Yvette? Do you want to tell us where you're studying?
Hi, sorry, I've sent you guys a message there because it is quite noisy where I am. But just quite quickly, as I haven't studied anything formally yet, so I'm looking for feedback. Where do I start as a beginner in the industry? Do you do just the Cape Wine Academy? Is there something more formal? So yes, I'm open to suggestions.
Okay, that's a great start of the conversation. Thanks, Yvette. I will answer that in just a second. How about Henrich? Am I saying your name right, Henrich? Or do we call you Henry for short?
I think you said Heinrich.
Heinrich.
There we go.
Heinrich. Okay, thank you, Yvette. Heinrich, do you want to tell us where you're studying or where you studied or what kind of interest you have in studying? Okay, maybe he can't hear us right now or maybe he didn't unmute his phone. Let's see. How about Audrey? Audrey, do you want to tell us where you're studying or where you studied or your interest in studying?
Hi everyone. I've studied at Cape Wine Academy, took the certificate. I passed my WSET Level 2 and I'm preparing the Level 3.
Perfect. All right, and Monica, do you want to tell us where you studied, where you're studying or what your interest level is in studying?
So I haven't started studying, but you have inspired me to begin studying. So I'm very curious how you're going to answer the lady's question who's a beginner, because
Okay.
I'm just a consumer right now, but you've inspired me this week. Well, this past month.
Well, thank you very much. We'll hear from Heather and then I will explain that, and maybe Silas and Batu and other people who are studying right now who have studied through some of these can add to my answer. Heather, where are you studying right now, or where do you study?
Oh, I'm not studying. I'm working. I'm working at a place called Ching Ching. It's in Cape Town. But I'm more interested into wine, and this year, besides this COVID going on, my plan was to do the WSET Level 2. So now when I was in the process of registering, that's when this whole thing started. Hopefully I'll do it soon.
Okay. Well, I mean, hopefully COVID will end and we'll get back to studying the normal way. So I'm just going to explain to you briefly. I'm going to mute everyone for a second, and then if you want to add something to my answer, please just raise your hand or type something in the chat, and then I'll unmute you, just because it's a little loud.
Okay.
So, okay, so I'll give you a little history of where I studied. So I studied with the North American Sommelier Association, which was a 9-month program, which was very intense, and it covered everything. It's kind of like the Cape Wine Academy or the Court of Master Sommeliers, not the intro level, but maybe the second level for Court of Master Sommeliers. It's a certified sommelier program, and it's really intense, and it focuses on regions, grape varietals, deductive tastings, food pairing, and service. So I think that that's kind of like the same thing as the Cape Wine Academy or the Quartermaster Sommeliers. The difference between that and WSET, WSET is more so for people who have no intentions ever of going into service. So like you say you never want to work on a restaurant floor, you never want to pour wine for people like private in their homes and things like that. So service is not a focus of WSET. WSET is strictly like, I would say like theory. So it's basically your wine regions, your wine grape varietals. They cover food pairing just a little bit. And what else is WSET? Yeah, so that's WSET. They do some deductive tasting, but I feel like it's basically just for more like book knowledge for wine, not necessarily service and in-person wine interaction. Like, I shouldn't say in-person, I should say like experience oriented. So that's my summary. Does anybody else have anything to add? No? All right, then I guess I did a good job of explaining it. So I hope that answers your question. Who was it? Who was it that asked the question? Was it Audrey? Yeah, so the difference would be WSET is mostly just book knowledge, grape varietals, regions, whereas the Cape Wine Academy and the Certified Somm program covers service and food pairing and deductive tasting very heavily. All right, so let's get into like what's covered in WSET, just because I feel like if you're starting out in the wine industry, for me, WSET, because some of these programs can get very expensive. I know when I studied with the North American Sommelier Association, it was pretty pricey. I mean, it was definitely well worth it, but it was pricey and it was so intense and it covered so much information. But the same thing with the Quartermaster Sommeliers and the Cape Wine Academy. Even though all of these programs do offer like, I wanna say like side courses or whatever, where you can take like, I know for the Cape Wine Academy, for example, you can become certified in brandy, or you can become certified in like a region. So you can do that. Another one is good. A good one is the Napa Wine Academy, because they have classes online as well. But WSET is perfect. It's perfect for people who are beginning in the wine industry. You might work for like a liquor store where you're buying and selling wine. You might be somebody who just loves wine and you just want to know more and you want to sound like a somm. So WSET is the perfect place to start. And it's pretty simple. So level 1, the introductory course, it's pretty simple. I feel like if you've been coming to these classes every week, you probably would be able to pass the introductory level, which is the first level for WSET, very easily. And that book looks like this. And it's super easy. Like most people who are professionals in the wine industry, they don't even bother taking this one because it's so simple. And then the next level would be WSET level 2. And then this is the book for the WSE level 2. And then this is where it becomes a little bit more intense. And so what's covered in this book is, I'm just gonna go over the chapters. Tasting and evaluating wine, that's something that we talked about with Joseph when he came on. And then pairing wine and food, storage and wine service. And that's the first section of the book. And then the second section of the book is factors affecting wine style. So then they talk about how wine is grown, the grape growing, and the labels. They talk about the winemaking process. And of course, with that, they're going to talk about the climate and all the different things that go into winemaking. And then section 3, they talk about all the different grape varieties, not all the different grape varietals, but the most popular grape varietals. So they talk about Pinot Noir, Zinfandel, Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio. I won't go down the whole list, but basically all the most popular grape varietals, they talk about their characteristics, the climates that they grow in, the climates that Zenit grow in, the most popular regions for these grapes, and I think that's it. And then like the styles that the grapes are made in. And so during these courses, these master classes, I've been trying to have the winemakers focus on some of these grapes. So for example, we're gonna have Sean from Ken Forrester come, and he's gonna talk only about Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon. So we'll get to find out some characteristics of those two grapes. We talked about Chardonnay already. We talked about Pinot Noir. So that was the whole point of this master class, was kind of like to follow along in here and to get like expert knowledge from the professionals who have joined us. And so then section four talks about sparkling wines and fortified wines. And then I like the study guide because it has this quiz at the end, and then you can take the quiz and you can kind of see how you're progressing with your study guide. My tips for studying is, any questions so far? That was the book. So it's not that big when you think about it. And the test for the WSET is but yeah, so that's the book. Does anybody have any questions at all? Let me just.
I have a question.
Okay.
So once you study and you finish the study guide, is there a certification process involved? And then where is it places that you can go and take the test?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. So the reason that I even took WSET, because I already studied with the North American Sommelier Association, but I like WSET a lot because it's recognized worldwide. So like city you're in, for the most part, especially if it's a major city in the world, they will have some kind of WSET program where you can take a 2-day course for level 2. It's a 2-day course, and then at the end of the course they give you a test. And then once you pass the test, you get like a lapel pin that says that you passed. You get a certificate, their logo on any of your business cards and things like that. So that's level 2. Level 1, I think they give you a certificate as well. And then level 3, of course, level 3, you get a lapel pin and you get a certificate. Level 3 is a lot more intense than level 2. And then with the Cape Wine Academy, you get a certificate as well, pin that says that you're a member of the Cape Wine Academy and you're certified Somm. And what else about it? Well, what else was your part of your question? Oh, and you can take, so WSET, you can just go on their website, you can find your city and you can find out where they're having courses or where they're having the test, and then you can take the test. And then for the Cape Wine Academy, of course, that's specific to this region. North American Sommelier Association is specific to North America. So there's a few cities in America and in Canada where you can actually take that test. Court of Master Sommeliers, same thing. You can go to their website and you can look for cities where they're taking the test. Anybody else have anything else to add about that? Let's see.
Oh, I just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to ask, let me say one has done level 1 and certificate with Cape Wine Academy, and you will love to study with is it what, WSET?
WSET.
Yes, I mean, you want to do level 3. I don't know if level 3 is similar as a diploma at Cape Wine Academy. And do they credit you for what you have done already, or do you have to start from level 1, or how does it work if you have to switch institutions?
So they don't credit you or anything like that, just because they're two totally different entities. They're two totally different organizations. WSET level 3, and then after WSET level 3, then you have WSET, a diploma. The diploma level, I think, would be the same as Cape Wine Academy diploma. Level 3 would be a step before that diploma level in Cape Wine Academy.
Because whatever that you went through, I can see that that's what we covered on certificate level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so what you could do is like, so for WSET, you can go and take the test, WSET level 2, you can just go in and take the test if you want to. You can sign up, you can take the test. Same thing for level 3. there's no prerequisite.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, I'm certified. I'm certified.
And
Okay.
on her question also, I've noticed with WSET, you can't write level 3 when you don't have level 2. You need to have level 2, then you write level 3.
Yes. Thank you, Heather.
The only thing,
Anybody-
this is Michelle. This is Michelle. The only thing that I would add is, and you said it pretty much, is that you can skip level 1 if you want to. I did. I have some friends that have several levels of certifications, and they said that based on just my general knowledge, just enjoying wine and going to different wine regions and tasting for fun, that I could skip level 1, and I did, and I went straight to level 2, and it was fine. I preferred taking the class with people because we did a lot of tastings in class, and we did a little bit of blind tasting too, which I think you get into a little bit more in level 3. I haven't taken level 3, but that I really enjoyed that, and just having the dialogue with the professor if you have that opportunity.
I do too. I love that too. And then you just learn so much more because there's so many things that, like, there's so much information about wine, and you can't always just write it in the textbook, right? And so, like,
exactly.
Yeah, and you learn more, like, just by going out and tasting and talking to winemakers and things like that. There's stuff that you can learn that's not even in the book. And your professor might have access to that, and people in the class might have access because they might have already worked for a winery or a tasting room or something like that. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, but I just want to add something to what you just said, because what I did is I went to University of Stellenbosch and I did winemaking, which was like a crash course. And when I got to Cape Wine Academy, I wanted to skip all this level and just go to diploma. But they just say that with the institution is not allowed.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, exactly. So like, I think, and you could probably tell more, but like Cape Wine Academy, the Court of Master Sommeliers, whatever their program is, you do have to follow it succinctly in that order, you know what I mean? And WSET is kind of like the same, except for level 1, you can just, the introductory course you could just skip. I think even with the Court of Master Sommeliers and the other somm groups, if they have an intro level, you can usually skip that intro level. But when it becomes to more details like winemaking, deductive tastings, regions, things like that, I don't think that you can skip those. Anybody else have anything else to add about this, the different types of schools?
I'll talk on behalf of the WSET, which is my background, and I'd like to just encourage the people who are looking forward to starting that. And just to let them know that it is doable. It's something that you can be able to arrange just maybe a few days or weeks prior to doing your exam, just to maybe pay out from. And with your the help of your program provider, you can be able to get the books beforehand, go through them. The level 3 could be somewhere between 2 weeks, and perhaps if you go through it beforehand, you know, when you go to the class, it will not be so intense, and by the time you're going for your examination, it will be something that is more an advantage to you, and as opposed to getting to that, you know, small time frame where you're supposed to do a lot, go through the book at the same time doing the testing, and perhaps discussing with the other students. So yeah, make an arrangement beforehand, get the book, and that will be something an added advantage to anyone who is looking forward to learn. Otherwise, it's very possible to do it.
I think that's a great point. That's a great segue into like how to study for these exams, right? Because there's so much information. And I think Silas made a good point. It's like, no matter which program that you're in, if you could get your hands on the study material or the book that they're reading, or even if you don't have that information, just get as many wine books as you can. So like, there's a lot that you can buy online, like the Wine Bible, it's a wine study guide that I bought online. There's all these books that you can just start to read before you even take the course, because that will help you. I know, like, it'll just help you understand exactly what they're talking about. So try to get as much reading material as possible. And the cool thing about this time in Corona is there's so many places that are offering online classes. So try to take those as best as you can. So let's just start talking about now, like, how do you study? Like, what are some techniques that you use to study? For me, I love color when I study, and I love just taking notes. Like, even if I don't even understand the notes at that time, I'll just take notes and then I'll just go back and I'll read the notes. So for example, let's right now from, let's see. So for example, these are just some notes that I wrote, and then I like to color code things because colors keep me like interested. And so I usually have like one notebook that I keep whenever I'm studying like a particular course or a particular topic, and then I just continue to just keep notes in that same notebook, so I'll always have them in the same place. Let me show you another thing that I do. So I also like to just kind of like make grids too when I study. So for example, this one, I don't know if you guys can see, but this is from the book. So there was a chapter on Grenache and Grenache, and basically what I did was I just tried to make like a grid out of it, right? So I have the name of the grape, and then I just have the regions that they're known for, right? And then when I have the regions, then I just go down and I write notes from the lecture or notes from my reading. So for example, this one says Spain, and I said, okay, it's a red wine, warm climates, high sugars, low acidity, thin skin, low to medium tannins. I just write down all the characteristics. And then I go to France and I write down the same, like the key characteristics that I take away from that lecture. So France, for example, Southern Rhone, Côte de Rhone, AOC, Côte de Rhone Village, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, full body, high alcohol. And then I did the same thing for the Rhone Valley. And so basically what happens with this, or what, then I just have these keywords, and then they just stick in my head. And then if I don't know something on this keyword, so if I go back to it the next week, then I know that's something that I have to research, because I should be able to tell you anything about any of these terms that are listed on here. And if I don't, if it just doesn't jump right out of my head, then I just go back to the book and I start reading about it until I can go down the list and tell you exactly why I wrote this on the paper. So that's one technique that I use to study. Does anybody else have a technique that they use to study that helps them?
I did a lot. Oh, go ahead, Yvette.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I had the pleasure of going to your home once to study with you, even though I had no idea what I was doing. But the way you study has really inspired me, because that's exactly what I'm doing now. Exactly the way you write it down. I haven't done the flashcards yet, because I saw that really, really does help, where you put your main words on the flashcards. I don't know if you have any to show now, but it's really a good way to study. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that you found that useful. Who was gonna go next?
Oh, I was Michelle. I follow a process similar to yours too, because I highlight in the book when we're, key things, and then I make notes. And to your point, I'll go back and like, I focus on the regions and the grapes and I make a lot of notes like you do, and I use flashcards as well. And then once I feel like I have a good grasp of a particular section, then I will go and take the portion of the test on that section that's in the back of the book, just to kind of test myself. And to your point, if there's something that I get wrong or I don't remember, I go back and revisit it.
Yeah, I think repetitiveness is like key to studying wine, just because there's so much information. There's so many grapes, there's so many regions. Yes, but I will show you the flashcards that Yvette was talking about. So like, I just buy flashcards, like index cards, or these little cards that I bought at this store in South Africa somewhere. but then I'll just write down words. So like Michele said, in the book, I'll just highlight key things that just stick out to me. And then that's where I'll get the notes from. And then that's where I'll get the flashcards. So after I have the notes, then I have the flashcards. And I kind of use the flashcards as like a matching game. So I kind of play a game with them. So like I just write down all these terms about wine. So cool to moderate climates, right? Medium acidity, medium tannins, light to medium body, strawberry, red plum, and herbaceous. So I have all these cards that have all these things on them, but then at some point I'll get to like the grapes, right? And so then I start to put the cards in order. So like medium acidity, medium tannins, light to medium body, strawberry, red plum, herbaceous. For me, this sounds like this could be like a Cabernet Franc, maybe even a Merlot. So if I come across Merlot, then I'll put it in that pile, right? So I'll just go put all the cards in categories, and then I just kind of like match them up. So yeah, Alsace. So Alsace is the same. So if I come across Riesling, then I'll just put the Riesling here. Medium bodied, I put this here. And so then, and I here because it's like my desk, sorry you guys. But then yeah, so that's how I use the flash.
I'm gonna do that.
Cards.
Thank you.
Words are all the terms that you should know when you're talking about wine. So chalked and dry. So like this would go in that Riesling pile, right? It would also go in like a Germany pile. Late harvest. This would go in my botrytis or like my Noble Rot pile or my dessert wine pile. Then the Chardonnay would go in my, what is this, Italian wines, late harvest. So this would go in my Italy pile. Yeah, so back to Jess, yeah, that was Italy. That's how I use the flashcards. Anybody else have any suggestions on how they study?
I don't know, I think
just,
mine doesn't really.
Sorry, go first.
No, you go. Yeah, they're ready.
Ladies first.
Ladies,
Okay.
take this.
Thank you. No, I was just saying that mine is very visual. So what I do, like, I don't even know if it works because from now on, I'm converted to 20. So what I would do, and I'll kind of like highlight the main topics, make my own notes, and use the test quiz at the end of every chapter, and just visualize everything in my own brain. But I think yours actually works better than my one.
I think you just have to try a lot of different stuff. Silas, what were you gonna say?
I'm gonna say that we have, all the speakers who've spoken before me have something that is probably more or less the same as what I do. I am one of those guys who also use flashcards. I've got a number of them to show here with different colors, and I use more or less, only that mine are slightly bigger. And so what I do is that I'll make slightly shorter notes, just highlighting the keywords, and maybe a few days to the examination, I tend not to go back to the book again and use the flashcards more than going back to the book because they're more summarized and easy to go through. The other thing that also works very well for me, as you said, is the visual aspect, whereby I plaster maps in big, manila papers on the wall. Look at my study area sometimes when I'm preparing for a study session. I plaster lots and lots of maps and stuff. And so by just visualizing and studying the map as I see them on the wall, it becomes more easier for me to be able to learn. And sometimes, like terminologies that tend to be a little bit, a bit tough to remember, I also write them down in big bulk numbers and plaster them on the wall. And the more I see them, every time that I visit my study area, they stick in my brain. And so, yeah, that's how I end up studying those terminologies and maps. Through visual aids.
Very cool.
Okay, for me, what I do, this technique I actually learned it from Lizelle the other time when we did like a wine session with her. So I create more of a character chart, something like that, whereby whichever wine that I'll be studying that time, I kind of summarize everything, the region, the characteristics and all that. Then I put it on the chart. So I find that it's quite easy for me to remember and to use my own words to describe a specific wine. And also so that I don't have like a lot of piles of charts or things just not lying around. I always like create one big chart where I actually like put it on my wall. I don't know if that makes sense. But
No,
for
that
me, for me, it works. It works like perfect. So if I want to remember, let's say a Pinot Noir, I always go back to the chart and say, okay, South African Pinot Noir is like this, and then from this other country, it's like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that learning is so it's so personal, right? So like however you learn, it just, you have to find ways that work best for you, and then you have to try different ways just because you're consuming so much information. And me, I know I'm not the most organized person, so I try to like make sense of it in my head. I try to learn how my brain thinks, because my brain can be all over the place sometimes. And so sometimes I have to like compartmentalize things and like say, okay, if this is this and this is that. But yeah, so I think it's unique for everyone. Does anybody else have any tips? No? All right.
I'm just gonna echo your words and say that, as you said, learning is very personal. So everything makes sense as long as it is working to your advantage.
Yes, as long as it's working. And I think Tatu made a good point too. It's just like, and Michele made the point too. It's just like quizzing yourself, like, so along the way, just to make sure that you're retaining the information. So no matter how you're getting to that point, doing the quiz at the back of the book, taking online wine quizzes, whatever it is, trying to explain that information to somebody else also helps. But yeah, taking the quizzes and then just trying to explain it to other people, what you've learned, making them listen to anything new that you've learned about wine is super helpful. So do you guys want to like go through some of the notes that I already have, or do you guys want to share some of your notes? You could always share your screen. What do you guys want to do? All right, let's go through some of the notes that I have already. So let's see. So one of the things that I do is I also like volunteer for this group called PYDA, and I teach a wine class for them, a very basic wine class, because they took the intro course. So I'm gonna share this slideshow that I gave them, and it just talks about the 6 noble grapes. And I mean, this probably would be just like a good start for us. It's gonna be intro, but I feel like it'll be like just a refresher course. I don't know. Okay, so let's see. Let me go back to Zoom and try to share my screen. Here we go. And let me see. How can I put this in presentation mode? I should be able to use this better. Okay. So basically, I just did this course for them, and it just talked about the 6 noble wine grapes of the world. And of course, we all should know what these are: Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, and Merlot. And anybody have any questions about those grapes so far? Nope. Okay. And then I just kind of broke it down into the white grapes and then the red grapes, which makes it super easy. So then you have your Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and your Riesling for the white grapes. And then for the red grapes, you have Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, and Merlot. And then this is just like a picture of like what the grapes would look like. And then these are the most popular wine regions of the world. So like if you take the entire world, here are the most populars. And then I kind of broke them down into Old World and then New World. And of course, the Old World is pretty much going to be things that are in Europe, things that have a long history of winemaking traditions and grape growing. So you're going to have France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Portugal. And then for the New World, you're going to have the United States, Argentina, Australia, South Africa, and Chile. And then this is just a map, because I think it's really important as well when you study to have like a map to visually see where things are, especially when you get into the region. So if somebody says like, oh, this wine comes from the southernmost part of Italy, and I can taste it because it's like a big fruity, fruit forward wine, then you can look at the map of Italy and you can see what regions are there, and you might see, okay, well, Sicily is one of the regions or whatever. So maps are super important when studying. And then what do these wine regions have in common? And so this is very, I keep saying, I'm gonna get a tattoo that says this 30 to 50. So wine regions that grow the best grapes are between the 30 and the 50-degree latitude. And that's in the Northern Hemisphere and in the Southern Hemisphere, which is, you know, pretty cool. So if you look at that map again, well, not that same map, but a different map, this just kind of shows you like where the wine regions are. This is perfect because you can actually see, okay, the 50 and the 30-degree latitude at the top where the United States is. On that same latitude, you have Spain, you have Italy, you have France, you have Germany, major wine regions. Another wine region that's up and coming is China. So China is a wine region that's up and coming. Believe it or not, I haven't tasted any Chinese wines yet, but I heard that they're developing. And if you look at Iran, so Iran is where Shiraz comes from originally. So Shiraz, Iran, the city of Shiraz is actually in this same latitude. I don't think we see too much in Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. You see some, but not a lot, just because of their cultural, maybe their religious practices. But then if you go to the Southern Hemisphere, again, you'll see it's the two, and then that's where you have Argentina, amazing wines in Argentina, right? Malbec. You have South Africa. So out of all the countries in Africa, South Africa has like the most booming wine region, then other wine regions would be Kenya. I think that's at the top, you can see. And then you have Australia and New Zealand, which are down here too in the 30 to 50-degree latitude. So maps are cool. Then you have Chardonnay. So Chardonnay is the first noble grape that we're going to talk about, and I call Chardonnay the queen of white wine. And when I study wine, I also like to give it like, I think who was Alistair who was talking about when he describes wine, he gives them like, he relates them to like a person. Well, when I talk about wines, I like to think of a nickname for them too. And so like, or find a nickname that's common. So for example, Chardonnay, the queen of white wine. Why? Because it grows everywhere. Why does it grow everywhere? Because Chardonnay just needs like a very like moderate to like warm climate. So it pretty much can grow in a lot of different regions. So that helps me remember something about Chardonnay. And then the major regions for Chardonnay would be France, Burgundy, France and Burgundy specifically, because of course they have like the best Chardonnay from, right? USA, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and South Africa. So according to the book, the WSET book, these are the main regions for this wine, right? And then the climate, we talked about the climate, but the climate with Chardonnay, it's important to note that the climate can change the taste of it, right? And so just think of it, cool equals high acidity, light to medium body. The fruits, and then moderate is gonna equal full body, medium, full acidity, lemon, stone fruits, and a bit of tropical fruits. So once you get into warmer climates, the wine gets heavier. The acidity is not as high, but you still have some acidity. And then you have more tropical fruit mixed with the lemon and the stone fruits. And then when you get into warm climates is when you're gonna have the with medium acidity stone fruits, like peaches, ripe peaches, tropical fruits like pineapple and some banana. And then the color for Chardonnay is usually medium to pale to medium yellow and gold. The side, still sparkling, malolactic conversion is common in Chardonnay. And then oak, yes, we do some oak and some unoaked. This medium, and the ageability is a yes. So this is like, I feel like this is a great study tool too. So like if you study wine and then you put together like a presentation like you were gonna present it to somebody, that absolutely helps to learn about. So I mean, and then I have pictures of like Chardonnay and the grapes, the small bunches, and then we talk about Sauvignon Blanc, and then I just go through the same thing with all the grapes. Riesling, Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, I call it the thin skin grape. So I can send this to you guys too if anybody needs it. I know some of the newbies who are just now studying wine. But then I look for slides on the internet that kind of just shows. I really like this slide because it shows like it has this blank piece of paper behind it, and it kind of shows you like how the color is progressing, like if it's transparent or if it's opaque or not. And then here's another picture of the Cabernet Sauvignon. And then I love it again because it has the white piece of paper. I don't know if you guys can see this white piece of paper in the back, but you can see how like Cabernet Sauvignon, the color is, it's darker, so you can't easily see the piece of paper. So this is really cool. And then that was the end. So I just basically did that for the students.
I like that. Could I have a copy? Michelle.
Sure, you can have a copy. I want to figure out, I wish I could send it through here. Does anybody know if I can send it through this? I have your email address, Michelle. I'll just send it to you by email.
I'll send you an email.
Okay, perfect.
I also appreciate a copy, Tuani.
Give you a copy as well. Yes.
Yes, please.
20.
Yes.
Can you also share your PowerPoint notes? Because they're outlined amazingly.
Yeah, let me pull that one up right now. Let's see. Wait a second. Let me pull it up. Just bear with me for 1 second. You have to read the direction. Wait, did you? Hold on for 1 second. Okay, here we go. I'm almost there, you guys, sorry. Okay, here we go. The notes that you were talking about, Tatu?
Sorry?
Are these the notes you were talking about?
Yeah, if you can share the slides that you just did and last week as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will. I have your email. So if I have your email, I'll just send you an email. If I don't have your email, just type it in the chat box and then I will send them to you. But if you guys wanted to go over like the stuff right now, if you guys have time, I mean, we can do that as well. I just don't want to bore you. So
We are definitely not bored. We are learning. Thank you.
Are you insane? This is like the most amazing thing during quarantine.
okay.
I'm not bored.
So, okay, perfect. So then let's just go over, this is just like a little course that I did, just because I said like it's easier for me to like tell people how to do it. That helps me learn. So this is a course and it just starts basically, and this is in the WSET book as well. So it's like, how is wine made? And if anybody has anything to add, please tell me. Let's update this together. If I put something that's wrong, I have no ego. Okay, it's a fly, sorry. All right, so how is wine made? So wine is basically, I call it, it's where yeast and sugar meet and they create this thing called alcohol babies. Okay. So they could make this thing called alcohol babies. And basically as the grapes grow on the vine, the sugar content increases, right? And when winemakers are making wine, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for like the sugar. They test the sugar. It's called bricks in some places. And they use this refractometer. They go in, they get a little bit of the juice, and then they see how much sugar is there. Some winemakers, I think it was last week when the winemaker said that they usually just taste the grapes because they just want to measure the sugar just by the taste, right? So you can do it that way as well. But then when the sugars reach a certain level amount of bricks, that's when they harvest and they ferment the grapes. In the fermentation process, what happens is the yeast eats the sugar and it creates alcohol and it creates CO2 as well, right? So the fermentation process, that's when the yeast starts to eat the sugar away and it creates alcohol, and then that's when the wine is born. It's important to keep this in mind. It's not in the notes, but for this process can happen with any fruit for the most part. Like you can make wine from any fruit. What makes fine wine so special is it comes from Vitis vinifera grapes. And so those grapes, they produce the most alcohol than any other fruit. That's what makes them so amazing. And then also what happens is that they produce these aromas and these flavors that don't just smell or taste like grape juice. You can have tomato, you can have green pepper, green onion, you can have black currant, black berries, all these different aromas and flavors, and that's what makes Vitis vinifera so special. So anyway, so you start the fermentation process and you start to make the wine. But the winemaking process actually starts on the vine. And so some of the active players are gonna be warmth, sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients. And this all comes from like photosynthesis, right? We all took high school science or junior high school science, but winemaking is the same thing. We talked about the latitudes, the best latitudes for growing grapes. Remember, that's between 30 and 50 degrees. Don't laugh at me when you see my tattoo. And then the key influencers for good winemaking or grape growing would be climate, the soil, bodies of water. There should always be like some form of body of water because it helps regulate the climate. That could be an ocean, it could be a river, usually not a lake, but like ocean, rivers, things like that. Mountains and weather conditions also influence how the wine is going to be made. So just keep that in mind whenever you're learning about a new wine or a new region. And then the parts of the grape. So you have the pulp, which is like pretty much the flesh of the grape. It's usually clear and it contains sugar, acid, and flavor. And then you have the seeds and the stem. The seeds and the stem, that's where you're gonna get the tannins. you know, when you're making wine, you have to kind of handle these with care because you don't want to crush a grape and crush the seeds and get all these tannins. So that's why when they talk about pressing the grapes, when they talk about there's a bladder inside this huge press, or they use a basket press, it's because, or they use their feet, it's because when you press the grapes, you gently want to just press the grapes softly so that the juice comes out, so that the skin breaks, but not so much so that the seeds crush and the seeds get mixed into the wine. And then they take off the stems because they don't want that flavor aromas in the wine, that flavor profile in the wine either, because it can make the wine extremely bitter. And then you have the skin. So the skin is where you're gonna get the color, you're gonna get flavor, you're gonna get tannins, especially for red wine. When the juice is left in contact with the skins, and you extract so much color, and you extract so much tannins too. And that's usually when they want a wine to age. They'll leave it in contact with the skins for a little bit longer than normal, just because they want to extract as much tannins as possible so that the wine can age for a very long time. But yeah. So any questions so far about like how wine is made? Oh, wait, let's just go over the growing seasons too. So the winemakers talked about this a lot too, like the growing season. So no matter if you're in the Southern Hemisphere or the Northern Hemisphere, it's all the same. It just happens in different months. So for example, I'm from California, and in California, our winter is December and January and February and March. Those are our winter months. So in the winter, no matter where you are, it's dormant, the vines are sleeping, there's pretty much not much happening. And then in the spring, that's when they start to flower, and then that's when the fruit sets. And then in the summer, that's when you start to see veraison. Veraison is basically like the color of the grapes turning. So for red wine grapes, or for purple grapes, or black grapes, however you call them, they're gonna start off green. They all start off green. But then in the summer months, you'll see them go from green to purple to maybe a reddish and then like purplish color. And then for the white wine grapes, they go from green to like yellow, or to like a different color green that's more translucent, so you can kind of see through the skin almost. And then in the fall, that's when the grapes start to ripen, and that's when the sugar levels are at their highest, and that's when people actually start to harvest for these grapes. So let's see. Hold on for a second. I think there's somebody who wants to come in. Oops, okay. Okay, so I'm sorry, I just got off of the okay. All right, and so those are the growing seasons. And then you have the actual process of making wine. So then I have this chart here. I'm trying to get rid of
Hey, Swanee,
yes.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Could you mute everybody? Because it's kind of hard to hear.
Yes. Hold on for a second. Participants, let's see. Okay, so I think everybody is muted. Tell me if there's any noise coming from my end too, because my boyfriend decided to cook, so it might be kind of loud. All right, so the actual winemaking process. And so then I just have like this chart, right? So like we have our white wine here on the left, and then we have our red wine on the right. And basically, you start off with white wines. You want to pick and you want to sort the berries. You want to destem and you want to crush. So a lot of times people don't usually do this destemming and crushing by hand anymore. They have a machine that they put it through, and then it kind of like shakes off the berries from the stem. And then it gently like breaks the skin of the grapes. And then you want to press. So when you press the wine, some people have a machine for this. Some people do it in a basket press, or they have this big stainless steel thing that has this bladder in it, and it gently presses the grape juice out of the wine. or you can stomp them with your feet. That's another way to press the grapes. I've done that before a couple times. And then you ferment the wine, and you ferment the wine, and that's when you start to, actually the yeast starts to eat the sugar and it creates the alcohol. And some people actually do natural fermentations, and then some people add yeast to the wine. It just depends on the winemaker. But either way, that's when the alcohol is actually created. And then after that, you have this actual wine. And so then you store the wine. So for white wines are usually stored in stainless steel tanks. White wines can be released soon after they're pressed. They can go straight to bottling, or sometimes they store them in stainless steel tanks for a couple months or up to 12 months, and then they bottle them. So that's the process for white wines. Red wine is just a little bit different. And the major difference between red wine and white wine is you're going to ferment the grape juice with the berries whole before you actually press them. So like you basically pick all these grapes, you distill them, put them in the simmer, then you put them in a stainless steel tank, and then you just have all these grape berries in a stainless steel tank, and they start to ferment. And when they start to ferment, the alcohol still starts to create. And then with red wine, you have things like punch downs and pump overs. And the punch down basically is when it's fermenting, it gets super, super hot. And then it gets like this, almost like this candy. It's like this candy coated top, like hard candy, but it's not hard candy, of course. But it's like this really hard, thick layer that you have to like break through. So that's called a punch down. So basically you take this thing that has like, it's flat at the bottom and it has this long, like, what is it called? Like a broom, but then it's flat at the bottom, right? And so then you just pretty much break through that hard crust, and you push all of those berries down. And then, because that thing gets so hard and you want all the color to go all the way through. And then they also do things like pump over. So what they'll do with the pump over is they'll drain all the wine out of the tank, right? So they have this huge tank, and then they'll hook a hose up to the tank, and then they'll hook the hose up to another tank, and then they have like this vacuum thing. You push a button, it pulls all the wine out, well, it doesn't go to another tank, it just goes over. So it goes into this vacuum-like machine, like a wet vac type thing, and then goes through the hoses, and then it goes back on top. And basically they're doing that just to mix all the color in with the wine. So that's called a pump over. So you have press downs and you have pump overs. And you guys can ask the winemakers when they join the call about any of these things, because I might be explaining them a little bit like with less detail than they would, or using the wrong terminology. But I have worked harvest a couple times, and then they store them. So they store them in stainless steel tanks, or they most commonly store them in oak barrels. And sometimes the last call we learned about clay vessels, clay, they have cement, things like that. And all of the different vessels that they store them in will have different types of aromas and flavors, and they add different characteristics to the wine. So after you store the wine, and red wine can be stored anywhere from 3 months to 5 years, like especially if it's a Barolo, or some kind of Bordeaux or something like that. It could be stored before it's even bottled. It could be stored in these oak barrels for that long before it's even put into a bottle, and then it's released. And so a key thing to remember though, so when you do get the bottle, the vintage date is not the day that they're releasing that wine, it's the day that they actually picked the grapes for that wine. But then that's the process for making red wine. So any questions about that? Just make a comment or raise your hand, and then if you have any questions. Okay, let's see. So then this section again just talks about the 6 noble wine grapes. And so like the way that I write my notes for it is pretty much the same information that I have on the PowerPoint, but then it's just kind of like in an outline form here. So we won't do Chardonnay because we did Chardonnay already. Let's do Riesling. So Riesling, I have the nickname here, and then it's called versatility. I call Riesling versatility just because when I think about Riesling, you can have it sparkling, you can have it dry, you can have it sweet. You can have it just like kind of sweet, but then you can have it like botrytis sweet. You can have a dessert wine sweet. So that's why I call it the versatile. Absolute versatility is the nickname that I gave it. And then the major regions, of course, are going to be Germany, France, Australia, and then America. The climate that Riesling likes is cool to moderate. The color is pale medium, yellow to deep yellow. The aromas, you're going to have fruity and floral, apple, pear, citrus, lemon, and lime. Okay. I think everybody is muted, sorry about that. And then the styles, so you can have dry to sweet, we talked about that. You can have still, sparkling, dessert, light body to medium body. It's acceptable to botrytis and noble rot. And the description, so for the description I have oak. Usually Riesling doesn't have any oak. They don't usually age it in any oak vessels. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rules, but generally there's no oak in Riesling. The acidity is in general high to very high, and the ageability is yes. So I've had a Riesling, well, I haven't had a Riesling. I saw a Riesling when I went to Grey Cliff Cellars, which is the second largest cellar in the world, and they had a Riesling from 1942 that I wish that they would have opened for me, but I couldn't afford to have it. So then I just go through this whole thing. Cabernet Sauvignon, of course, I call that the king of wine, the king of all wines. Red wines are white wines, but especially red wines, just because, just like Chardonnay, Cabernet is pretty much grown all over the world. Of course, it's originally from France. The major regions are going to be France, the USA, Chile, and South Africa. The climate is moderate to warm climates. The color is usually medium to intense, ruby to garnet. The aromas are black currants, blackberries. It's herbalicious. I said herbalicious, but I mean herbaceous. So you're gonna get a hint of mint, a hint of bell pepper. The style is usually dry and still. And yes, it's definitely aged in oaks. Oak adds some complexity to it. It's medium to full body, high in tannins, high in acidity. Its ageability is yes, which happens to Cabernet as it ages. As it becomes softer, becomes more complex, you'll have flavors like smoke, vanilla, clove. Those are the flavors that develop in Cabernet after it ages. So I can go through all of them. I don't know if you guys want me to. And then we have styles of wine. So like for the styles of wine, you're gonna have dry. And so when people talk about dry, what is dry, right? So dry is gonna be wines that have 0 residual sugar. They can be red, they can be white, they can be sparkling, but dry means 0 residual sugar. And so fermentation is complete with the fermentation is complete with these dry wines. That means that the yeast eats all the sugar. There's no sugar remaining. They're just non-sweet wines. And then sweet wines, and I basically break this down because a lot of times, even people who study wine, I feel like sometimes we mess this up because you might taste like a Zinfandel from California and somebody might be like, oh, this is a sweet red wine, even though it's not sweet because there's no residual sugar. So, okay, sorry, Yvette. Okay, she has to go. So sweet wines. So sweet wines are wines that have some residual sugar. They can be red, they can be white, they can be sparkling wines. But basically there's 4 ways to get sweet wine. The first way is you stop the fermentation early. So you stop the fermentation before the yeast eats all the sugar. A good example of this is white Zinfandel. And white Zinfandel is popular in California or in the States, but I don't think it's as popular here. But white Zinfandel was this sweet wine that was made by mistake. So like they stopped the fermentation before all the sugar was eaten, and then the wine was sweet and they decided to sell it. You can have a sweet wine because it's a late harvest wine. So when a wine stays on the vine for a long time, typically what happens is the sugar level increases and the alcohol level increases. And so more alcohol, more sugar levels develop, and that's what happens. And then you can have a wine that has noble rot or botrytis. And so of course, noble rot is a fungus that grows on wine, and it basically makes the wine like rotten, and it shrivels up to like a raisin almost, and it becomes very sweet and very concentrated in flavors. And yeah, so that's how you get the noble rot or the botrytis wines, and you squeeze it out and you get this really complex, this really just like really good wine. It's sweet, it's complex, it has high acidity usually, and high sugars. And then the last one I don't have in these notes, I have to finish the notes, is ice wine. And ice wine basically is wine when it happens in colder regions, when the grapes actually freeze, and they pick these grapes when they're frozen, and then they press them. And so they might pick them when they're frozen, and they might pick them before they actually start to like when they still have like high sugar and not that much alcohol. And so they pick these grapes when they're frozen, and then they press the juice out of them, and then that's how you get the sweet wine. So I didn't finish. I still have to talk about sparkling and fortified wines, but we'll be here all day talking about wines if that happens. And I didn't finish my notes. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and let's see if anybody has any questions. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I will send those notes to you guys, so just make sure you have your email address in the text box.
Thank you so much, Kwani. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But basically, so that's how I study, and like just making the notes, like after you read stuff in the book, making the note cards, like I just have different types, and then like I'm always in different moods. Sometimes I might just want to play a game with myself. Sometimes I just might want to like read my notes. Sometimes I might just want to go back and read a couple chapters in the book. So I feel like however you study, the most important thing is that you're always studying for wine. Any questions? No?
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Wait a second. Let me unmute Tatu. Tatu, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you about faulty wines, because I kind of like struggle with tainted and undrinkable wine in terms of the eye clarity, the nose, and the taste bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you want to know about tainted wine. So like, how can you tell if something's tainted or?
Yeah. In terms of the faulty wines, how can I know that it's undrinkable in terms of the eye, the clarity and the color, the nose, aromas, and the taste, and with the bitterness? Like, how do I go through that?
Well, I think for me and anybody else who, you guys can always answer these questions. I know there's some people who actually work on the floor at Somms. Let's first talk about tainted wines, right? So you're at a restaurant and you pay a whole bunch of money for a bottle of wine, comes to your table, the waiter pours you some, you smell it and it smells off. Possibility that wine is tainted. That wine could be corked, or it could be some French wine, right? Sorry, France, no. But you bring it to your table and it smells off. And so the first thing that I would do is tell the waiter that, you know what, I think that this wine is corked. You know, can you try it? Can you smell it? And so he might smell it. If he says, oh, it smells fine, you know, I've opened the bottle all the time and this is the aroma profile. After that, the best thing that you can do is just go through like a deductive tasting where you're just like evaluating the wine and looking at if it's cloudy, right? Because if it's cloudy, that could be an indication that something went wrong in the winemaking process. And then you want to taste it. And so when you taste the wine, if it still tastes off, then you can insist that maybe this wine is corked, and you can just say, you know what, I'm not happy with it, and send that wine back. But I think to find out if a wine actually has any faults, you have to go through like all the steps for tasting wine. So you definitely want to look at the color. You want to see if the color has if it's changed. For example, if it's a white wine and the color is off, so like let's say the color has turned to like a brownish yellow, that's an indication that maybe the wine wasn't stored right and it got a little bit oxidation to it. If it's not supposed to be that way. So you want to definitely look at the wine, look at the color. If it's a red wine and it has like more brick color, but a little bit of a brown rim to it, that's another sign that it could be. Anytime you see brown in your wine, that's a clear sign that the wine is oxidized. Some people make their wines in that style, but most wines that you're getting in the restaurants, if you just order a Cabernet, it shouldn't have any brown or any or a Chardonnay. So looking at the color, the next thing is, of course, smelling it. So if it smells like your boyfriend's tennis shoes, like if he doesn't wear any socks, or if it smells like old wet newspaper or wet dog, that's an indication that the wine could be corked. So, and then of course you want to taste it. Like at those 2 points, I probably would just send it back. I wouldn't taste it, but maybe it's an older wine. Sometimes when you order a wine that's an older vintage, for example, if you order a wine that's 20 years old, or if you order a wine that's like a serious Italian or French wine, they can smell like wet floor. They can have these aromas that are not appealing, right? So if it's a young wine, if you ordered a 2014, 15 Cabernet Sauvignon and it smells like old newspapers, I would probably send that back because it's corked. I wouldn't taste it. But if it's a French wine that's 20 years old, I probably would taste it, because sometimes it could smell that way, but when you taste it, it tastes totally different. And that could just be the style of the wine. It could just have those aromas just because of the way that it was made. So that's how you can tell. I don't know if that answers your question for the most part, Tatu.
Oh yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. So any other questions about tainted wine or wine?
Funny.
Wine?
Funny. When you say it's corked, does that denotes that it has an off taste? Is that what that term means?
Yeah. So
okay.
Corked, C-O-R-K-E-D, it doesn't mean that it's closed with cork. It means that the TCA that probably affects like a small percentage of wines happened and the wine went bad. It went south really quickly.
Okay.
Any more questions? No more questions about like the notes, no more questions about wine in general?